Welcome to the Lawless Astrology channel. My name is Dabney Lawless, and I'm super excited today to introduce you to Christopher Renstrom. You may already know Christopher Renstrom. He is an author, he's an actor, he is an astrologer extraordinaire, he is an all around awesome human being. I am going to link so many things below because he has got a book about your rising sign that is a must get. He has his own YouTube channel, which I think the September forecast, which I just watched, is brilliant. And then also, he is going to be at the Oprah retreat in October in Park City, and you can actually study with him. So, all that stuff's going to be below. So, welcome, Christopher.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's so delightful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So those of us who, join me all the time know that what we do here, I'm an evolutionary astrologer, and what I do is I look at how the cosmos can help us down here on planet Earth live a more peaceful life. And so today, and my cat is going to help us with this.
With the
My cat's amazing.
cosmos.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the outer planet transits of 2025. So Christopher may not know this, but those who watch this channel often know that I talk about the fact that we are in a transition phase and that next year, right now things might still seem very cloudy. We might not know where we're going. There's still a lot of reflection, redoing, kind of, digging into where we're going, but it may not be clear. It's about to get a lot more clear in
Yeah.
2025.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to kind of take you through those outer planet transits and, kind of give you a preview of what to expect. Yeah. So, what would you like to start with the big dog because he's first? I know
The
this is
big dog.
it's technically in the fall that Pluto is going into Aquarius, but it seems like maybe chronologically. But you let me know. What would you like to touch on first?
Sure, sure. I'm looking forward to this transition. The transition is long and it's slow because we are dealing with the outer planets. And the plus point to outer planet transits is that they take a long time. Sometimes people are like, oh, when's this going to be over? But what's nice about them taking a long time is that you get used to the energy. Okay. It's not like Uranus switching signs and then it's like, hi, your life is upside down or something like that. The planets sort of they step into the new sign, they come back into the previous sign, they move into the new sign. And it really kind of like it's almost like introducing a beat in music. They get you used to this idea so that when you step over the threshold, when the planets move into the new signs, it's not a culture shock. It's not, this shock to the system. You can actually sort of get used to where they are positioning themselves. What's nice about this is that all of the planets are in zodiac signs that sextile one another. Okay. And we haven't seen in a long time. We did have, for instance, Pluto and Capricorn traveling with Neptune and Pisces. That was a sextile. But Uranus was in Aries, so it was squaring the Pluto in Capricorn. What's nice is that you've got the Pluto moving into Aquarius. It's trining Uranus when it gets into Gemini. They are both sextiling the Neptune and the Saturn when Saturn joins Neptune in Aries. So these planets are in conversation with one another. They're not talking at the same time. They're not like talk to the hand. They're not like, I don't know what you're talking about. They're in conversation with one another. And we will be feeling that impact here. It's also a big shift because with Pluto and Neptune having been in Capricorn and Pisces, that was more low energy. Okay, that's a slower energy. We're dealing with earth and water here. It's low energy. When we move into this air and fire energy, it's much more activated and it's much more enthusiastic and it's much more probably in your face. So we're going to be we're going to have to be ready for that, because it's all of a sudden like, oh, that was really nice playing the yoga music in the background, but I want some heavy metal, so it's like, it's like someone switched the channel thing. So that's why it's nice when Okay, well, maybe instead of heavy metal, we can do, I don't know, Depeche Mode, and we can move that with so we get this gradual introduction into the energy. But fire and air together is very invigorated and very invigorating. And so, when you were talking about, well, it's kind of taken us a little to, maybe we've been reflective moving from this and maybe slower. That's earth and water. That's not going to be the case when we go into fire and air. Fire and air is we are now rejoining our show already in broadcast, already in showing. So we're going to be running to catch up with these energies, especially since they're sextiling. As astrologers, we're always spending as much time in the future as we are in the past. Okay. We go and we study our history and look for what was going on back then when we had a similar configuration. But what I find fascinating about Pluto in Capricorn is really when climate change became something everyone understood. Okay. And Pluto is a terminus. It's a terminus planet. It's like this is the end of the road. So one of the things that Pluto does when it's in a sign is, you sure you want to go there? Because this is the end of the road. You can't keep doing what you've been doing. And when you think of Earth, Earth element, I mean, we're dealing with the Earth. Pluto really reigns over the Earth, if you think about it. It's the planet itself. All the modern planets are associated with realms. Uranus is the starry heavens. Neptune is the ocean, which covers three-quarters of the planet. And Pluto is everything that's under the planet, everything that's under Earth. And so Pluto and Capricorn is really kind of like, you've gone as far as you can go with this. You can continue with wars, and you can continue with deforestation, and you can continue with all of those things, but don't expect a planet on the other side of it. Or how about don't expect you to be on this planet on the other side of it, because the oceans can rise and wipe you out and that can be it. So there is a kind of there can be a doom and gloom to Pluto, but I actually see something more powerful than that. Pluto is really about that choice is in your hands. When you remember that Pluto was discovered in 1930, the modern planets are called the modern planets because they're planets discovered after 1781, which is basically the modern age. Uranus is discovered 1781, Neptune 1846, Pluto 1930, the midpoint between the beginning of the First World War and the end of the Second. Pluto's discovery is also associated with the dawn of the atomic age, of nuclear energy. Not since Adam and Eve took the apple of knowledge off the tree has an event transformed all of humanity. We are now in charge of whether we live or die. There's no God or bigger surface. Pluto says, you wanted to make these scientific breakthroughs, you wanted to advance to this place. Here's the apple from the
Oh,
tree of knowledge. Do you have self-knowledge, or are you going to act out of, uh, grabbiness and whatever? If there's a point where you stand up to taking that next step forward, this is pretty much it. And I think Pluto and Capricorn has really registered that, and it has set up Pluto and Aquarius, because Pluto Aquarius is basically a society is only as good as the people in it, is Pluto and Aquarius. So how are you? We had our dress rehearsal with Saturn and Aquarius when we were on lockdown, okay, and told to go to our rooms so we could behave ourselves. Um, but with Pluto and Aquarius, it really brings up society is only as good as the people in it. And that's to me the step from Pluto in Capricorn. You've reached the end of the line with this. What kind of world? And then Pluto and Aquarius, what kind of society do you want to live in? And that's like the great question. And I think it's the great creative challenge. And I think it's the great invite from the stars.
yeah, and that's so true. I mean, the reality is like we have empowered these people who are in power as a society.
Mhm.
And so there is a little bit of a collective reckoning that will take place. but I see a lot of optimism in, flipping this switch too, because, I talk on this channel, but like I love the Aquarian nature of Kamala Harris's campaign where she's talking about power to the people and we won't go back. I mean, those are all very Aquarian themes, and I think I'm optimistic and hopeful that we are going to be going to a new place where we can start to address climate change and we can start to address some of the corruption.
Yeah, well, everyone made a big deal about the United States, the Pluto return in Capricorn in the United States chart. To me, the bigger thing is the Pluto return in Aquarius.
Hmm.
It's when Pluto's in Aquarius that you have the discovery of Uranus. So you have the overthrow of the old order, astrologically speaking. You have the introduction of the modern signs. But it's Pluto in Aquarius where you get the US Constitution. It's the first time you get a democracy functioning or trying to function, the great experiment that is the United States. And it's the first time that you get the human Bill of Rights or Declaration of Rights, which fuels the French Revolution. It's also when Haiti overthrows slaveholding during this period of time of Pluto and Aquarius. So Pluto and Aquarius really comes at the height, the zenith of the Enlightenment. Pluto and Aquarius is in America, it's the great democratic experiment. In France, it's kill the old regime. And we're not even going to have a calendar. Year one starts now. And in Haiti, it's just like we are saying no to slavery, and we are the most valued island of the Sugar Islands, and we have overthrown all of this. So this is really, to me, Pluto Aquarius is much more important because it's the last time that we really looked at government on this fundamental level, and government being transferred from monarchy or religious institutions to the people. Who are the people? What are the people? What is a person? So all of these were brought up last time Pluto was in the zodiac sign of Aquarius.
That's fascinating. It'll be really interesting to see not only what happens here in the US, but also in France and Haiti, where they had major upheaval and changes.
Yeah.
So, okay, so not only do we have the big dog moving into a
I
new
love
sign,
that you call it the big dog.
I'm an evolutionary astrologer, so the nodes and Pluto are like my life, basically, when it comes to astrology.
Okay.
Um, but we also have Neptune, and
Mhm.
Neptune is going into Aries, and so we talked on that briefly. So do you want to sort of take us through what your vision of Neptune and Aries will be?
Neptune glamorizes whatever zodiac sign it's in. Okay. And I use glamorize in the Harry Potter sense. Okay. Which is, when someone is glamored, they're under a spell, they're under the illusion, you
Okay.
know, of something. It's not like glamorous like Rita Hayworth, it's like throwing back her hair in Gilda or something like that. But it's glamorous and glamoring. You're under the spell of something. So when we have Neptune entering the zodiac sign of Aries, it's going to glamorize everything Aries. All right. So one of the things I'm tracking on my radar is the rise of Christian nationalism. Okay. Because that's something I'm going to want to be watching very closely with Neptune moving into the zodiac sign of Aries. We already had a reconnect or reincarnation, so to speak, of the Holy Crusades with Uranus going through Aries, where it was just like, the holy, the battles in the Holy Land and the West and the Holy Land and all these sorts of things. And so with the whole terminology of Christian soldiers and things like that, with Neptune going into Aries, I'm concerned about that, a kind of militancy arising during that period of time. But what Neptune in Aries may also do is perhaps glamorize the more noble aspects of Aries, the chivalric code from Chevalier, the knight, the idea that you put honor and nobility in front of your own selfish needs, that you make sacrifices, for the weak, that you champion and advocate for the weak. These can also be Aries attributes. A lot of times we get, sort of like Aries is the god of war and it's berserker fury and all these things. And Aries can be that way. But some of those soldiers turned into knights. Some of those soldiers turned into troubadours. Some of those soldiers, introduced noble virtues and heroic codes. So that could also make a comeback during the period of time that Neptune is in Aries. But certainly with Neptune switching from Pisces to Aries, I think we're going to finally be on the end of all this apocalyptic stuff. Sometimes we forget, with Pisces being at the last sign of the zodiac, Pisces can get into its apocalyptic fantasies. It's like the world ends here. There's a greater world to come, and all. It's the last sign of the zodiac. What do you want? So with Neptune going into Aries, which is the first sign of the zodiac, it can be the spring that follows the winter. It can be what did they say at the beginning of Star Wars? A new hope. That sort of a thing, and that could also be associated a new future, a new world. That would certainly be Neptune and Aries connecting to Pluto and Aquarius, and that would back up some of what you were saying, Dabney, about a new world coming forward, or finally fulfilling the promise that was made over 200 years ago. And what does that world and that society look like?
It's really interesting that you bring up the kind of apocalyptic porn that we've all been force fed for the past.
Putting it right, yeah.
There's been so many movies and TV shows, and before we got on the recording here, Christopher and I were talking about how television and movies are kind of like the new mythology. And so many times you can sort of see the zeitgeist of what people are thinking and what's going on through these things. We were talking about how Pluto and Capricorn, it kind of started. Game of Thrones was like one of the biggest
Right.
TV shows ever. And then, we just had Succession. And both of these had very Pluto and Capricorn themes. And so it'll be interesting to see what kind of comes up. But we've seen, with Neptune and Pisces, the rise of addiction and the rise of homelessness. And so I think on the upside, we can look at hopefully solutions to some of these things. But I love that you bring up the apocalyptic thing, because I think we're all so sick of that.
Apocalypse out.
Well, especially post COVID, I think we were all just like, enough already. And like, especially when you feel the pressure of climate change.
Yeah.
So, Neptune and Aries, I'm not sugarcoating it. I hear what you're saying. Like, that is a glamorization of war. And it
Right.
is a
Or
glamorization.
militancy, or any sort of militancy. Yeah.
Right. And also, it can be things like hurricanes, and there can be a climate change aspect to it too. But at the same time,
The,
we have to hope for the
the wildfires are all going to be connected to air and fire, because what does air and fire do in a wildfire, right? The winds blow the fire and it makes it bigger and it moves faster. I mean, that's the energy of air and fire together, you
yeah.
know. So, but I think that once it's property damage and costs and all those sorts of things, people start looking at something like climate change less abstractly and more in the day-to-day realm, you know.
Solution based, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like we can no longer be in delusion when the destruction is here and
Mhm.
in front of us. So
And if the solution generates money, all the better. I mean, capitalism goes where the money is.
yeah,
And
I mean, I live
sometimes,
in California, and we're
right.
already seeing so many issues with insurance, and people
Yeah,
getting booted off. And so there's going to have to be real world solutions, or we are going to have that sort of apocalyptic realization, which is always a possibility. But let's not go there, because
right.
we've got to get up tomorrow, and I've got to feed the cat and take my son to school. And
But it was also seated in the Pluto in Capricorn. Sometimes what people forget is that Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn ruled over the poor and the downtrodden. Okay. So Capricorn was a sign that was often associated with the peasants, the laborers, as well as being associated with social outcasts or people who had been marginalized. And I think what we also saw with Pluto and Capricorn was class division. You know, the disappearing of the middle class and this, and the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, but you get rich getting richer, you know, isolated at the top,
Hockey stick, yeah.
or getting poorer, widening at the bottom. You do sort of like, wow, what was that like back when the French Revolution took place? You know, and you read about New Yorker just did something on the history of rich people or something like that. It was a quick article that they had, but you know, someone in contemporary society saying, you know, listen, if we continue with this imbalance, at some point someone's going to take out the pitchforks, you know. And the thing is, that's a Pluto and Capricorn thing too, that separation of the wealth from the working or marginalized people or oppressed people, that sort of thing. That also falls in the Pluto and Capricorn rubric. We have a tendency in the way astrology is practiced nowadays, our understanding of the modern vocabulary, to think of Capricorn as the CEO. Capricorn traditionally were the peasants, the farmers who had to work the land, and every year didn't know if there was going to be famine or
Right.
drought or anything like that. So that's also connected to that terrain, that vocabulary when we talk about Pluto and Capricorn.
So one of the other big planets, so Neptune is going to be entering Aries March 30th, and then it will go back for a spell in
How
Pisces.
appropriate that it enters with the sun.
So that, but around the same time in spring, May 24th, we have Saturn entering Aries for the first time. And
Yeah.
so even though it's not technically one of the outer planets, I do think for 2025, it's going to be a big shift. A big shift. Everything kind of feels like this reset energy where you have both Neptune and the nodes, and everything's flipping over, and Saturn going into Aries. That's another interesting piece of this puzzle.
Yeah. Um, Saturn into Aries is going to be probably a response to, I mean, I'm going to want to remember and keep in mind what was going on in 2008, 2009, when Pluto was in Capricorn, when planets, especially it's really the modern ones, when they pass through a sign, they kind of like plant seeds or mines, depending on it, that when another major planet begins to square it, those things become triggered.
Right.
You know, and with Saturn having been the ruler of Capricorn, goes into Aries and it starts squaring some of those points that Pluto left behind when it was in early Capricorn. I'll be very interested to see if events of the time are responding to that 2008, early 2009 period.
Very interesting. So, okay, so beyond that, then we have July 7th, we have Uranus entering Gemini,
Mm,
which is another huge archetypal shift. And for a long time now, we've had Uranus in Taurus, which has been an earth sign, and
mm,
it has had much more to do. And I think that has also coincided with people seeing more climate change related disasters.
mm.
Now, Uranus in Gemini, maybe we'll see some solutions or ideas based around that. No, give me your thoughts. I'm never the optimist, in case you can't
I am
tell.
too. I am too. I am too. But I just have to share with you, um, unless you know it already, and just be like, fast forward, Christopher. But Uranus Gemini has a notorious reputation, um, especially with the United States of America's chart, its horoscope. It's Dr. Luke Broughton, who was an English transplant to America. he and his brothers, who are all named after the writers of the Gospels. There's Luke, there was Mark, there was Matthew. Okay. Anyway, he came from a family of astrologers who were also practicing herbalists in the 19th century. And so they were England based. And Mark and Luke moved to Philadelphia. I believe it's in the 1850s, maybe it's the late 1840s. And so he sets up shop in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as an astrologer. And as he says at the time, no one in America knew how to cast a horoscope but him and a couple of other British transplants. What he does is he starts this gazette. I think it's the Broughton Planetary Guide and Ephemeris or something like that. But he starts this astrology magazine. And his intention was to start it as an astrology reference thing and to really kind of educate the American public in astrology. Well, the Civil War breaks out, and what happens is that his original plans change. And what Broughton does with his Gazette is that he works with predictions of how the war unfolds.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, it's very hard to get any copies of this because all the Civil War memorabilia collectors have snatched every one of them up, not because they are interested in astrology, but because he was the one who correctly predicted the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And it was so well known that the police were investigating him about the assassination. But in any case, in one of his first, it's like issue 5 or something like that, he predicts that there will be an American Civil War in April of 1861. And what he bases this on is Uranus being at 9 degrees Gemini. The last time Uranus had been at 9 degrees Gemini, 84 years before, was Lexington and Concord, the Battle of Lexington and Concord, okay, which had started the Revolutionary War. And he says, when it leaves Gemini, we'll have the end. That was 5 years later. And indeed, 5 years later was the end of the Revolutionary War. He applies that same thinking to Uranus at 9 degrees Gemini with the American Civil War. He predicts the succession of, I think is it South Carolina, North Carolina? One of those that starts the war. Sorry, I faded on that. And that it would end in April 1865, which is Appomattox. That's picked up on by John Hazelrig, who was a New York Broadway actor in the 1900s, and he was also an astrologer. And he said, well, according to this, that means we're going to have to be very careful when Uranus comes back to Gemini again. And so Evangeline Adams, who you may or may not know, she was a very famous astrologer in the 1920s in America and had her own radio show and had her Evangeline Adams astrology books in drugstores coast to coast. She was an extremely famous personality whom they would interview whenever she would get on an ocean liner and travel to Europe. And so in 1923, they say, Miss Adams, what do you have to say? And she talked about the stock market and this and that. And she's like, oh, by the way, there's going to be a terrific war that's going to change the fortunes of America and the future of America that's coming up. And they're like, oh, when is it? When is it? And she was like, this war, and she invokes Broughton. Okay, this war will be fought it will begin at the end of 1942, December 1942, which was the last time that Uranus was at 9 degrees Gemini. So with Uranus coming around to 9 degrees Gemini, and it had gotten a reputation for war or civil distress. Civil war was actually the big thing. If you've been listening, and I know everyone has in the past couple of years, more and more talk of like, will there be an impending civil war in the United States? Will there be a succession of states in the United States? So in 2027, Uranus comes back to that 9 degrees Gemini point. And that's something, because astrologers, as I said, we spend as much time in the future as we do in the past. It's something to sort of like keep on the radar with something along those lines.
And unfortunately, like war is often a reality. Do you feel like there's any potential with the sextile that things could be more harmonious or can be avoided? I mean, we don't have a crystal ball, but
Right.
um,
The thing is, wars are a part of human history. Okay, they come and go. Um, and they also are big shapers of human culture and society, as are pandemics, you know. And the thing is, what we need to remember is we're still here, you know, and that you can work with these energies and shape them. I was trained initially in humanistic astrology, and I sort of wandered away from it, but I came back to it actually really, really powerfully, really, really strongly. I'd gotten sort of involved in predictive, and predictive to me, although it could be sort of like exhilarating and fun, it wasn't really, and everyone has their own astrology that they practice, but for me, it wasn't really astrology. It wasn't, you can talk about what's happening on the grand scheme, the big stage, all these things, but they still impact us as people. And I'm more interested in the people piece, you
right.
know. And so that's why, I found my way back to humanistic astrology. And we get humanistic astrology from Dane Rudhyar, with his Astrology of Personality that he publishes in the 1930s. He's the one who introduces or takes the Jungian model and puts it onto astrology and introduces the notion of archetypes. Um, Humanistic astrology talks about a collaboration with the planetary energies. Okay, you collaborate, you work with it, you form creative collaborations with them, and you can redirect this. You know, something can be a tool or a weapon. The
Yeah.
choice is yours. And I think that the more that we live and learn, to use a phrase we use every day, the more that we invoke the presence of the planets and their histories and their temperaments and their perspectives, the most beautiful thing that I think astrology teaches from the outright is that there's no one perspective. Every astrological chart has its own perspective. And the beauty when people have a chart reading or learn astrology is, that's why my husband's like that. He's a Leo. Of course, it's, what happens isn't like, oh, I tagged it. My husband's a Leo. What happens is that's the way Leos see the world. I get it, you
Right.
know. And so astrology says this is the way different people see the world. And it teaches an appreciation and a mindfulness and a listening to that. But, you know, fate and destiny is what you choose. It's the oldest story that we have on the planet. You don't eat from the tree. I mean, and that's set in emotion. Okay. It's like, there's always choice. Some are more informed than others, but with astrology, what astrology does is that it helps us to understand the choice, what's going into the choice. And it helps us to understand that we live in an entwined reality. I mean, we talk about ecosystems on the planet. We're living in a great karmic cosmic ecosystem where every one of us has a part to play.
I also think that there's the high road and the low road, right? And the higher expression of Pluto and Aquarius and Neptune and Aries and Uranus and Gemini, if I was to combine all those things and really look at what the high road would be, it would be much more equality,
Oh, yeah.
and it would be much more advances in technology that benefit people, not necessarily that benefit only the billionaires. And it would be advances in medical health, and it would be kind of like you said, protecting the downtrodden. But then there's the low side, which can be, AI taking over all of our jobs and us being forced to live on, a basic income. So then there's kind of this, like, everyone is the same, and then we're kind of militarized, and then, like you said, there's all this history of America going to war during Uranus and Gemini. So it is very much what we bring to what energy we want to bring to it. And so I think the biggest saving grace is the harmonious aspects between these outer planets. But
Yeah,
there's a but, and also realizing that the truth is it's never all the bad or all the good,
right.
you
And
know?
right. But and in addition to that, it's how you access and work with it. You know, Neptune glamorizes, as I said, a sign that it passes in, but Neptune also gives us vision. I used to be like, oh, Neptune's illusion and disillusionment or something like that. And what the more that I study the history of astrology, the more I come to appreciate things like it took astrologers 100 years to even begin to describe what might be the personality of Uranus after its discovery. Uranus doesn't really start appearing in horoscopes until almost 100 years after its discovery. Okay. And so Neptune is just, maybe, I don't know, Neptune's recent, Pluto's even more recent. So we're still learning about these outer planets. And that's something that's really, really important to keep in mind. We're learning about them as we proceed forward. And and again, stars are guides. That's what the planets are as well. They're guides. They're there to guide us and to help us with informed actions and to navigate our lives.
And we can't really shift what's happening in the world without shifting what's happening within ourselves. And ultimately, that is, there can be chaos all around you, but you can be calm and centered and having a good life, even if there is war. And, so not to minimize that, but just to realize that we have to do the work internally on ourselves.
You have to do the work. I was just reminded of where I was going until I went like, Neptune is a vision. That's what Neptune is. Neptune is dream. But it's not a dream that you have when you're sleeping at night, where it's like, how am I supposed to make sense of like why there was a cat flying and then all of a sudden my first grade teacher was there? Like that's not the dream that Neptune is. Neptune is a vision. Neptune is Martin Luther King Jr.'s I have a dream. Okay. That vision, that dream that Martin Luther King Jr. has for America, look at the way it inspired people. Look at it, the way it drew people out of themselves and to come together as a community. Look at the way that it crossed racial divides and raised the consciousness in America. You know, that is an important thing. When someone comes forward with a vision, Neptune and Aries can be that. When someone comes forward with a vision, something for us to all aspire to. Fire signs are all about inspiration, enthusiasm, and aspiration. So when you have that placement, you can have that. Here's a vision. Here's a vision of America now. Here's the vision of a world. I have a dream. I have a dream of what America can be. I have a dream of what the world can be following all of this, you know? And it's something that Kamala Harris presented. It wasn't just optimism in her speech. She presented a vision, and everyone's like, well, where are the policy points? How are we going to make this happen? No, she presented a vision. This is a vision. When Michelle Obama talks about the unfulfilled promise, you know, this is a vision. This is how we can fulfill that promise. This is how we can be in tune to the original democratic experiment. So visions are very powerful. We get mad at them, angry at them because we can get disillusioned, disappointed. It didn't work out the way we wanted it to. You know, look at the history of civil rights. The expectation was, after at the, after MLK Jr. was assassinated or whatever, well, we've worked it and we're going to keep that. No, it transmuted and went in a different direction, but it also spread out across the country in an inevitable way, you
Right.
know. And so those seeds were planted. So in recent years, they grew, you know. So this is the beauty of Neptune, is that vision, not a wish fulfillment. It's that vision. And that's something that Neptune can give. And that heroic vision would certainly be in keeping with the theme of Neptune being in the zodiac sign of Aries.
It's really history in the making. These are big shifts that have not happened at the same time. And they point back to other big periods of time in our history as a country or as a world. And
Yeah.
so I love that you came on here to kind of just give us a preview. I'm sure as we get closer, you have to check, I'm going to have videos, and I know Christopher on his own channel, which you have to go follow him right now. And I'm going to put his link down there, Christopher Renstrom Astrology. Absolutely. You guys are going to love him. Seriously, if you don't already know him from like Astrology Hub or something, it's fantastic. So I think you'll get more and more, we'll get more and more in depth. Hopefully he'll come back on my channel
I'd
sometime.
love to. When?
Yay, I'm excited. Everyone's gonna love you. I can tell you that right now. So anyway, I'm sorry about my cat, everyone, but she wanted to participate. And
We
what can
love
I say?
Bailey. We love Bailey participating.
Maybe your dog will participate next time.
We wouldn't get through the show.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Well, so anyway, thank you, Christopher. I'm going to put all the dates below as well for when these things are happening, just so you kind of can keep an eye on it. There's so much more to talk about here, but we could go on for days. So thank you for your time, Christopher. Are you good? Any other last tidbit?
I'm wonderful. My one little last remark I would make is that Pluto retrogrades back down into Capricorn on September 1st. And it's there until it re-enters Aquarius on November 17th. And of course, we have the very critical Mars in Cancer at 29 degrees, opposite Pluto at 29 degrees Capricorn, happening simultaneously with a Venus-Jupiter opposition on the Sunday before the election. Okay, so it's like, there it
Everyone
is.
take a deep breath.
Everyone take a deep breath. But the thing that I really want you to also keep in mind with Pluto retrograding back down into Capricorn, all the work that Pluto has done in Capricorn, Pluto, I read it as a planet of ordeals and the transformations that arise from them. Okay. You wouldn't be able to transform unless you had gone on your underworld journey first. Pluto also rewards those who brave its ordeals. So the work that Pluto has done in Capricorn is done. The retrograde back down into Capricorn is Pluto sort of checking in on your reborn self and seeing if everything's good, you know. We talk about caterpillars transforming into butterflies. So Pluto's kind of circling around after you've transformed into the butterfly, which was at the end of 2023. Pluto's circling back around and making sure that, how are you doing with those butterfly wings? You wearing them okay? You doing okay? So this Pluto back down in Capricorn is really showing you the way that things used to be versus who you are now. And if you can keep that in mind, you might even have something that, challenges you in a way, like, maybe I need to go back to the old me. And Pluto and Capricorn's here to say, you're good. You're good with who you've transformed into. So let's stay with that and let's stay true to that. So I just want you to keep that in mind when Pluto retrogrades back down into Capricorn on September 1st.
That's very wise in a way that I think a lot of people can resonate with. I think it's also optimistic in the sense that I think there's a lot of fear about the Pluto going back into Capricorn before the election, but I tend to agree with you that we're not going back. There's kind of a disintegration of the things that no longer were should be happening under Pluto and Capricorn. It's kind of the final hurrah before we enter this new space. And so it is, I think everybody has felt like, especially since COVID, like, I don't know where I'm going. The world isn't what it used to be.
Right.
And I don't necessarily like the world I'm in now. I don't understand it. There's a lot of like, and that to me, I think is the Pluto and Neptune, Saturn, and, or excuse me, Neptune in Pisces,
Mhm.
Saturn in Pisces. So the flipping over is a little bit of the chrysalis breaking free and the butterfly having to get out and fly, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's again the optimistic high road. And so if we can't make that happen in the world, and there are still wars in Ukraine and in Gaza and like horrible things happening that we can't even wrap our brains around, what we need to do is we need to look, where can we become a butterfly? Where can we step into this new self that we have been metamorphosizing in over the past decade, really?
Yeah. Beautifully put.
Thank you for giving us all so much inspiration. One
Oh,
last plug for Christopher. I'm so sorry, everyone, you can fast forward, but I just have to say he does amazing work about astrology and Christianity too. And he has done some really, really cool videos on like Astrology Hub. Maybe I can link to a couple if you want me to, or if they're on your channel as well.
sure.
They're really, really fascinating about the history of astrology and Christianity, and it gives you a lot of juice from the symbolisms. And he works a lot with archetypes, and I get so much out of it that I watch them multiple times. So,
Oh, I'm so glad. Oh boy, I'm so glad you saw those because,
yeah.
this history between astrology and Christianity is not adverse or hostile. They they were bedfellows for a few centuries there, so
Yeah,
and
and if you,
that's
that would be a topic
beautiful.
I would love to have you on here if you'd be willing to,
Absolutely.
retrod that as well. It's just so well done and so interesting, and I love every second of it. So especially people that were brought up Catholic and like have a lot of baggage around the church and like kind of understanding some of these stories. I just love those videos.
Well,
So
and I think the thing that's really important for us astrologers to keep in mind about astrology and the Catholic Church in particular, we wouldn't have our astrology books if it weren't for the Catholic Church. What libraries do you think they were hanging out in? Okay. It was the monks who were copying over Firmicus Maternus and Ptolemy. So, A, we wouldn't have our astrology if it weren't for the Catholic Church, right? Astrology isn't an oral tradition that's passed on through the generations, it's in books, okay? And B, if the Catholic Church had been that adverse to astrology, they could have wiped it out at any point by burning those books. Something to think about when you think about astrology and Christianity.
oh my God, I wish I could take his brain and put it some of the like facts and stuff, put them in mine, but I don't have that knowledge. I love this. So, okay, so I don't bore everybody with my yammering and fangirl, I just want to say there's a reason and a season for it all. The universe is conspiring to help us. And until next time, stargazers, 2025, we got this.